All right, kids, welcome, welcome. Today is Monday, July 12th. We're doing some English review. We're going to go over an awesome review. There's going to be probably somewhere between 8 and 10 grammar rules for English. And we're going to go over this. So if you feel like you need to watch this again, I think this is awesome. I'm going to kind of Scooby-Doo it in a different way. So what's on the videos on the website and everything, it's the same concept, but I'm just going to use different vocabulary because sometimes kids like to see it in a different way. All right, so quick overview of what we're going to do for today. Today is test 52C English. We're going to go over a couple different sets here. It's set A. We'll look at some trains. Set B is going to be a dot comma and fanboys. Set C is going to be a review of Mr. Chung. And set D is something called the comma fence. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, everyone. All right, first things first, we're going to be dealing with commas in set A. So the rules of grammar that we did so far in set A were abandoned boxcar, which is an independent clause, a comma, and then a dependent clause. So really only dealing with one comma, all right? The second rule of grammar that you're going to see here is the multiple commas. That's called the comma staircase. So here you see our choo-choo train. We've got 3 commas. All right, so that's grammar rule number 2. The third grammar rule we're going to talk about and cluster it into set A is a dot comma. A dot comma everyone learned in school as a list of stuff. We're going to cluster those together. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So in our train, abandoned boxcar says that we have an independent clause. Let me go ahead and pull up a marker here. And let's do, how about gold? All right, so here's our train. And our train in independent clause, our engine, is going to be able to drive around and do whatever it wants. Okay, a boxcar can't really drive around because it's not doesn't have any power. So we need the independent clause, or we need the engine to drive us around. All right, so that boxcar is going to be considered a dependent clause. All right, you'll notice that the independent clause is connected to the boxcar, independent dependent, by a comma or a train hitch. Now let's say that we're going to add some box cars on the back end. We've got a second comma and a third comma, so there's 3 commas here. It's going to be independent, comma, dependent, comma, dependent. All right, as we saw before, and I'll go ahead and pull up a sentence here and type something out. We'll put it right down over here, and let's do this in, how about green? All right, so here it is right here. Type it out in green. All right, so let's see. I live in Edina, comma, a city in Minnesota, comma, a state in northern USA. All right, comma, let's see. Yeah, so we've got, let's see, 1, we've got 2. Let's do here, let's actually do this. Northern state. It says seen in the upper USA. All right, so I'm just making this up as we go here, but basically you can see that we've got some commas. We'll switch up the colors so the commas pop. Here we've got our independent clause, I live in Edina. That's our engine. And then now we see that we've got a state, a city in Minnesota. That's going to be our dependent clause. And then we've got a comma here. A northern state, that's a dependent clause. Then there's another comma. And then you got another dependent clause, seen in the upper USA. All right, so you already know that that's an analogy of what we have on your train. But keep in mind here that when we have a comma and a dependent clause, dependent starts with the letter D, just like definition. So what comes after the independent clause is like a mini definition of the word right before it. Okay, so this city in Minnesota gives you a mini definition of Edina. What's Edina? It's a city in Minnesota. Okay, mini definition, dependent clause. Here, a northern state, that's a mini definition of Minnesota. and Minnesota, once again, is a noun, just like Edina. So you see the consistency here? We have dependent clauses that define the word right before it, which usually, not always, but usually will be a noun, okay? A northern state, okay, and then seen in the upper USA is a mini definition of a northern state. Northern state, that's going to be our noun as well. So think of it this way. Dependent clauses define the word right before it, and usually you're going to go ahead and have a noun there that defines that. Now, why would I say we're going to have the word right before it as a noun? So just thinking logically, this is how I invented this, by the way. So a noun is a person, place, a thing, it's an idea, or it's an animal. So that would be 5 things. But a verb is an action. So there's 5 times the chances that the word is going to be a noun as opposed to a verb, because there's more nouns in the world that are verbs. Okay. Now, do you really need a mini definition of a verb? Okay. So let me give you an example, and we'll just kind of type this out. An example would be, you know, let's just write this out here in red. Sam went running. And running is a verb, okay? So if I put something here after, I'm going to give a mini definition of what running is. Sam went running, a thing you do when you move your legs back and forth really fast. Okay, you see how that's kind of dumb? Like, verbs sometimes, for the most part, are kind of self-evident. I'm not saying you'll never do it, but most of the time you don't really need a mini definition of the word right before it. But sometimes you have these nouns, and if you're not from Minnesota and you were to go to like Boston, for example, and you say Edina, like they just don't know where that is. So they need a little mini definition. What's Edina? It's a city in Minnesota. Oh, okay. Well, if I go over to Russia, maybe Russians don't know the definition of Minnesota. They don't really know where that is. So you would see we would go on to give it more information. Okay, so that's the consistency set A, independent and a dependent. Dependent clause starts with the letter D, just like definition. Now, when you come back over here, let's take a look at the one right below it. Right below it is going to be our dot dot. What you learned in school was it's going to present a list. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just switch up. We'll type this out, okay? So let's say Harshini likes food, dot dot, okay? And then we'd say something like pizza, spaghetti, and how about, TV dinners are her favorite. All right, so we get this here. Now, looking at this, you see that we've got a dot comma, but wait, I feel like this is like really similar. So if we just highlight the dot dot right here, you see that I like Harshini likes food. That's an independent clause, and that's the train engine. And then the dependent clause, right? Here's a comma. Dependent clause defines the word right before it. Food. Pizza is food. That's a mini definition of the food Harshini likes. Spaghetti is a mini definition of food. And TV dinners is also, see how it leads you back to the independent clause noun? Just like if we were to go back up here, Minnesota defines Edina, northern state defines Minnesota, but also it goes back to the main noun, which is Edina, and seen in the upper USA. Edina is seen in the upper USA. So once again, we always go back to the independent clause and look at what we have there. Here, this is dependent clauses, independent, dependent, 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 but also you're going to see that this is a list of stuff. So not only did you just incorporate the definition of a dot dot into your repertoire from what you learned in school, you're starting to see that there's some consistency with independent, dependent, 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 just like our train, all right? So there you have it. You've got abandoned boxcar at 1 comma. You've got multiple commas, and the multiple commas are just boxcars added on the end of that. The third thing that you see here is you see that basically what you're going to have here is a dot dot, which is the same thing as what you see with multiple commas, all right? Only in this particular case, the dot dot is going to be a list of stuff, okay? Furthermore, if we look at the dot dot, a dot dot, if you haven't seen this video, a dot dot, the first thing that you're going to see is, like you learned in school, it's a list of stuff, okay? The second thing that you're going to see for a definition is it's a description, okay? So if we have one dot dot and it looks like this, an independent clause and a dot dot here, that the dependent clause is going to be like a little description of the word right before. Now that's very, very, very similar to what you see with the abandoned boxcar, and we'll go over that more specifically later, okay? The third thing that you're going to see here is a direct quote. So you could have an independent clause, you could have a dot dot, and then you could have a quotation here with the quotation marks. If you use this quotation here is going to be a longer quote. It's usually going to be 5 words or more, all right? 5 words or more. Your teachers just use a comma here, but a dot dot can be used as well, all right? And we will go over that. One thing to keep in mind, that a dot dot could actually connect 2 independent clauses together, all right? Please take note of that. A dot dot is a list, a description, or a direct quote. It could be an independent and a dependent on both sides of the dot dot, or it could be 2 independents. All right, so that is set A. Let's move on to set B. Set B is going to be a dot comma. All right, so our dot comma, we're going to have an independent clause, and then we're going to have a dot comma, and we're going to have a dependent clause. So when I was in Egypt, I was learning some hieroglyphs, and then when I went over there, and Mustafa was one of the guides, we were walking around and we were at the Sphinx. And I don't know if you've ever been to Cairo, where the Khufu's great temple is, where the 3 pyramids are, and the Giza Plateau, and then the Sphinx, the cat that's sitting there. It's blocked off now, but we had special passes to go in to see the Sphinx, and between the Sphinx's legs there's a huge tablet. It's probably about 7 feet tall, and it basically tells the story of why the Sphinx was created. And it's written in hieroglyphs, and hieroglyphs, like if you read it, you can kind of like, it's like little pictures and diagrams and stuff like that. And when you see it, you can kind of like get the gist of what's going on. Like for example, if you see like a guy holding a bow and arrow, and then there's a deer or a gazelle over there, you're probably thinking, okay, so he's hunting, and he's hunting because he's gonna like hungry, he's gonna like, you know, eat the deer. Well, the deer is kind of big, so maybe he's gonna like share it with other people, maybe his family or maybe the neighbors. And then when he can't, you know, catch any deer, then the neighbors will probably feed him too. It's kind of like a communal thing. And I'm just making it up as I go, and I was like reading the hieroglyphs, and I thought that was kind of weird, and Mustafa was like, man, you're really good with the hieroglyphs. And I was literally guessing, okay? So if you look over here and take a look at why and how all of this stuff was created, it's going to make a lot more sense to you. So first of all, if you look at a dot comma, and the reason I call it a dot comma is because a dot represents a period. So a period, if you have a period, you got to have, on both sides of the period, you've got to have 2 sentences, right? One sentence, a period, and then you start a new sentence. That's pretty straightforward. So when you see that, just recognize that you've got 2 independents. Here's an independent, and here's an independent, okay? Well, here, the comma kind of looks like a hook, and we already know that a hook attaches stuff, just like an independent clause is hooked to the dependent clause. The dependent clause will give you like a mini definition of what's right before it, which you just saw earlier, okay? But before, back in the day, a hook is something that like connects stuff together. So that means that the 2 independents, one on the left and one on the right, will have some type of connection because they're linked together. So let me give you a sentence here, all right? So let's say we write about, how about let's, Rohit likes red dot comma, Prof T likes blue. All right, both of these are independent clauses, and both of them are linked together with the dot comma because there's some type of association. You see red and blue are kind of connected together because they're both specifics of the general category of colors. See how they're connected together? It's two independent clauses that are connected together. Now let's say I change the sentence and I say, you know, Harshini likes pizza, dot comma, Professor Thomas likes hot dogs. Hot dogs and pizza are both foods, so they're specific foods that are linked together in the category of the general, which is food. Remember, a dot comma is basically taking two independent clauses and putting them together and linking them. Instead of putting a period there, we link them together because they're associated. One independent has a specific, the other has a specific, and those specifics are going to be linked together to the general category. All right? Sam likes soccer. Tim likes football. Soccer and football are going to be independents. Okay? And they're both related. So that's set B, independent clauses using the dot comma. All right, now if you look over here, you're going to see one of the movies. Oh, by the way, the name of that movie is called The Mystery of Missing Miss Dottie Commerce. Dottie Commerce, kind of like dot comma. It's a lady, a fictitious person in Hong Kong. And if you watch that movie, it's kind of a fun thing. You get a chance to go up to the tallest, one of the tallest buildings in the world. It's a huge building. I think it's like 116 floors. And you can see like literally the whole city. It's a pretty cool experience. All right. Missing Miss Dottie Commerce, it's dot comma. All right. So if you look over here, the next set B component we're going to talk about is fanboys. The movie for this one is called Hypnotizing the Chupacabra. Okay, Hypnotizing the Chupacabra, and it's the fanboys movie. So what you're going to have for the fanboys is one comma, and this is the exception to the abandoned boxcar. You already know that when you have one comma, you should have an independent and a dependent, or vice versa. Okay, you could have the dependent clause on the front and then the independent on the back, but more often you're going to see an independent on the front with a dependent clause on the back, as you saw with our choo-choo train up here in set A. All right, now with a fanboys, you're going to have an independent clause, a comma, and then in this box right here, and let's go ahead and circle it in red. This box here, the word right after the comma is a fanboys word, and then after you're going to have another independent clause. Now, why do I link these two together in set B, a dot comma and a fanboys? Because it's pretty much the same thing. All right, you're going to have two independent clauses connected together, and a fanboys is almost like you know, this period up here in the top. So just remember, independent clause, dot comma, independent clause. Here, if you see an independent clause, a comma, and then the first word after the comma right here is a fanboys, then you know that you're going to start another independent clause, and this is going to be the exception to the abandoned boxcar. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and define the words fanboys. F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. For, F, for, A, and, N, nor, B, but, O, your, O, or, Y, yet, S, so. F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. For and nor, but, or, yet, and so. All right. If you haven't learned this rule yet, you might want to write it down. Once again, F is for, A and, N nor, B is but, O or, Y is yet, and S is so. All right, probably learned that in school. The other way that you could kind of remember this is but and yet. Those are pirate flags. So they're kind of related on that one. All right, but the fanboys is the exception to abandoned boxcar. Instead of an independent and a dependent, you're going to link two independents together. That's set B, everyone. All right. Set C is Mr. Chung, and Mr. Chung is this crazy man from Hong Kong. And I asked him, can you get me a set of the headphones so I can listen to the quality of the work that you guys make here at Soto? And then he closed his eyes, tilted his head back, opened up his mouth, and said, "Aww." And then he went and got me a cup of coffee because he had no idea what I just said because he doesn't speak English. So I thought that was kind of weird. So I asked him again through sign language, you go get headphones. I look, you go. And then he got me some sugar. So he still didn't understand, even though I was trying to speak sign language. All right, Mr. Chung. Aww, got me a bowl of sugar. All right. He didn't speak any English, and so no headphones on the first try when I went to Hong Kong and Shenzhen. I thought that this is such a weird story, and when I tell you this, most kids don't believe that that's actually a real story. So we invented the Mr. Chung rule. The Mr. Chung rule is Mr. Chung, when he closes his eyes, right, it looks like M dashes. His nose, when he tilted his back, his nose back, you could see his nostrils, which kind of looks like two commas. And when he opened up his mouth, you can see on the outside, oh, there's skin folds here, which look like parentheses. All right, Mr. Chung's face. The thing to take away with Mr. Chung is this. Dashes, commas, and brackets all do the same thing. We already know that if you look here, pizza, that's a dependent clause. An Italian dish, that's a dependent clause. And is yummy is a dependent clause. The middle dependent clause. There's 3 dependent clauses, but the middle dependent clause, just like all of our other dependent clauses, define the word right before the comma, the first one. What is pizza? It's an Italian dish. See it? See the consistency with our dependent clauses? Dependent clauses start with the letter D, like definition. An Italian dish is a mini definition of pizza. And what kind of word is pizza? Yep, a noun. All right. Now, when you see 2 commas, it's important to recognize that with Mr. Chung, that when you're analyzing this, you have 3 dependent clauses. If you have an independent clause, comma, and then 2 dependent clauses, that is not Mr. Chung, even though there's 2 commas. What you see there is a abandoned boxcar with another boxcar added on the bottom, the back end, which is kind of like our comma staircase. All right, remember the difference between what we saw here in set A with the multiple commas was we have an independent on the front and then commas and then dependent clauses following. Chung is not that way. Chung is 3 dependent clauses. When you cross out the middle dependent clause, you're going to see that when you put the front 2 dependent clauses together, you get the independent there. Pizza is yummy. See how here is pizza? That's the noun, and is the verb. Another way, and when you put those together, you get your independent. Another way of looking at this is Mr. Chung separates the noun away from the verb. Pizza and is yummy. Pizza is the noun, is yummy is the verb. What's between the commas is just separating the noun away from the verb and giving you a mini definition of the word right before it, which once again is going to be our noun. All right? So some kids will ask me at this point, they'll say, why do they call them M dashes? Okay, so let's talk about this. Here is the letter M, and here is the letter N. All right? An N dash, you already know what that is, because an N dash is called a hyphen. A hyphen is short. An M dash is a double length. See the difference? M and N. An N is a single hump and an M is a double hump. So an N dash is just this short and an M dash is double the length. Okay? N dash is going to be your hyphen, and M dash is what you're going to use, which is synonymous with a comma and parentheses. All right, that's your set C. All right, moving right along, kids. All right, we are into set D. Set D is the comma fence. All right, lots of kids don't know this because it's hidden in the website. It's under, I think it's in the review it section. There's not a movie yet for the comma fence. That's why. So what is the comma fence? The comma fence basically says this, that we're going to have a list, and I'm going to write this down. We've got a list of stuff, or you could have a list of descriptive words. Okay? And what's going to happen is you're going to separate those words with a comma. All right? So let's go ahead and just illustrate this a little further. So it's almost like building a fence. Here we are in this first bracket up here, and our sentence is, the car is black blue. Okay, so if you see here in this first sentence up here, and I'm going to switch my color up to yellow, this first sentence right here, you see that there is no comma, no fence. So you have a car, and the car is black blue. It's one color. It's black with a tinge of blue. When you look at it real close, you see on the inside maybe it's got some flecks of blue. Black blue. In the second sentence example down over here with the star, there's a comma right here that's red. The car is black, comma, blue. When you build a fence in a piece of property, it now becomes two pieces of property, and in this case, it becomes two colors. It's black and it's blue. All right? That leads us over here to the red. Know it. A comma fence comma is like the word and. Let's take the comma, get the comma out of there, and let's just say the word and. The car is black and blue. Black and blue. All right? So just think of a comma in this particular case with the stuff as being synonymous with the word and. All right? So that's the stuff. Okay? The other thing is could be some type of like descriptive words, and I just wrote this out really fast. She ran fast, quickly down the track. And if fast and quickly are next to each other, that's just one way of describing. It's fast and quick. Maybe she's twitchy. Okay? As soon as you put the comma in here between fast and quick, now we have two things. It's fast and quick. It's two different characteristics. So these words that are descriptive are like characteristics of what's going on. So another way of looking at this descriptive words are characteristics. And let's actually write that down. I think that's a really good word. Characteristics. All right. Just remember, if you have a comma fence problem, just say the word and. All right? Especially if it's in a list of stuff. It could be a list of descriptive words or characteristics, or a list of things that they're talking about. Just simply say the word and that's going to help you out. That's a huge secret on that one. All right, that's set D, everyone. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our practice test. It's test 52C. Kids watching at home, what you want to do is make sure that you've got the test in front of you, test 52C. Go ahead and time this to see around how much time we have, and that's the end of this lesson. When you do take any practice test, it's imperative that you write your wrong answers down on the review sheet that's found under the Home Study tab, Classroom. It's just a few posts down. It says print this out before every class. English review sheet. List all the problems out that you got wrong, and then make sure you understand exactly what rule you're getting it wrong. And if you still have problems like deciding on what rule of grammar it is, please text the professor or ask me in person, what rule would I use on this particular problem 52, test 52C, problem 17, or whatever. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to get started. That's the end of this lecture. Kids, thanks so much for watching this lecture, and let's get going with the practice.